Speak now to Iain Duncan Smith, former leader of the Conservative Party. Good morning to you, Mr. Duncan Smith. What are your expectations of what the Prime Minister can achieve as she meets European leaders today?
Well, I think what the Prime Minister has to do is convey to them the reality that their deal will no longer be on the table if they don't give her what she's after. And what she's after, and should be after, I believe, is to say to them, this backstop that exists right now, this Northern Ireland backstop, is intolerable because it puts Northern Ireland separately outside the UK. And secondly, it also means that we have a problem because we can't leave it, and that it will be an absolute constitutional first for us. And Germany wouldn't accept that, France wouldn't accept that for themselves. Why should we accept that? And they need to resolve that, and that doesn't cost them anything. What will cost them, she should say, is if this deal doesn't go ahead, because they won't get their 39 billion, they'll have a huge black hole, and also at the same time they'll end up with a process where we won't have those sort of arrangements which suit them and suit their businesses.
But why would the EU27, after 2.5 years or thereabouts of negotiation, do anything that places the Republic of Ireland at a disadvantage, if that's what this would mean?
But the Republic of Ireland won't be at a disadvantage. What we've presented, a group of myself, including customs expert and trade lawyers, have written a protocol and trade chapter for the EU. We went and saw them over this. We've actually seen the government. The open borders policy, which was originally being started, by the way, by Enda Kenny, the previous Taoiseach in Ireland. It was Mr Varadkar that came in and insisted that they had this ludicrous backstop, and the EU just went along with it. And the reality is that they know that it will, at the end, have to come down to having just a commitment to open borders, and all the processes that exist at the moment enable that to happen. Let me give you one example. In Rotterdam at the moment, the biggest port in Europe, they spot check only 1.5% of all non-EU goods coming in, and they don't even do that at the border. So there is absolutely no requirement to have this ludicrous backstop pressed upon the UK. The European Union knows it, and so does Mr Varadkar, but he's playing a game for Irish politics, and that needs to stop. And the UK has to say to them, you are putting at risk your own settlement. Your own money that we were supposed to be giving you will not be coming across to the EU if you don't agree something. And it's not major, it's not massive, just means that they need to agree that they won't go along with this, and they'll have an open borders policy. But,
you know, many people who live on the border, either in Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland, don't see this backstop as ludicrous. They have genuine fears. They don't see it as a game. And isn't this about the failure of the UK government to foresee the issues that might crop up around the backstop and to sort this out during the negotiations and not wait until the 11th hour?
You know, I agree with you. I agree that back in December, I publicly on the BBC News said, do not sign up to this backstop because it will make the end agreement almost impossible. I was right then, and I have then since then tried to find a solution. The solution is, as I said, what Enda Kenny, the previous Taoiseach, had started, but Mr Varadkar stopped, which is making the arrangements for a commitment to an open border. And what we've actually heard, here's the irony, we've heard the EU, Ireland and the UK all say no matter what, there will be no hard border on Ireland. Mr Varadkar said about 2 weeks ago, even if Britain leaves without a deal, there'll be no hard border. So if we all agree there is going to be no hard border, then what we need to do is go to this open borders policy. It's achievable now, doesn't need technology. All the customs experts in Europe accept that it's feasible, and we simply commit to that and line up all the conditions that are necessary. That is not a major concession on the EU's part because it delivers exactly what they're after. And after all, what was the backstop about? It was about not having a hard border in Ireland, and that can be delivered. But it doesn't need to be delivered by this terrible deal, which at the end of the day has us unable to leave it if we think the EU isn't cooperating, because the EU has a say as to whether we leave it at the last time. And that will be a precedent. You know, we can leave the UN, we can leave NATO, we can even leave the EU as a sovereign right, but we cannot leave this backstop on an international treaty. That would be an absolute first.
So if the Prime Minister can't get anything more than reassurances and cosmetic changes, as one politician has suggested to me this morning, as a result of these meetings today, and that doesn't satisfy the critics of her deal within the Conservative Party. What do you think is going to unfold over the next few weeks?
Well, I think that the Prime Minister has to take the EU right to the wire on this one. We know from the past the only time the EU ever actually stares and puts something down is when they're staring in the face a collapse of an agreement. The 28th
of March, if necessary, Mr. Duncan Smith?
I have to say to you, all timescales are off. What she has to do is insist on this and be prepared to walk away from the table. Colleagues in the Parliament here are united in one sense, that they want the Prime Minister, for the first time in these negotiations, to really show some steel. What she has to do is say categorically to the EU, I mean business here. And it's not all one way. It's not we're desperate for this deal. It's that the EU themselves demanded at the beginning that we pay them some money to fill the hole that leaving will leave them with, and that's amounting to around 39 billion. It could even be more. That's a lot of money coming to the EU, and if they don't get that, they are going to have to find that from taxpayers across the EU. So my answer is very simple to them. You know, you risk what you want only to give us something that is absolutely functional, but you cannot insist on the UK. Its sovereign right to leave a treaty is dismissed. We have to have that sovereign right, and we have to have it in the treaty, not just little words of assurance from a couple of late-night meetings. That doesn't work, and they know that.
Iain Duncan Smith, former Conservative Party leader, thank you very much.